Hello, I'm Amanda Martin Decker, and I work for ADAC, the Alcohol and Drug Abuse Council, right here in Delaware County. Today's presentation, we're going to be talking about the brain. We're going to be talking about how COVID has actually changed our brain patterns, and we're going to learn techniques and strategies that can help us navigate kind of this new normal that we are in. So let me go ahead and share my presentation. Okay, trauma-sensitive approach to COVID-19. So the reason we have presentations like this is because we want to foster healthy and safe living environments. And that means that as our world changes, we make adjustments. We want to be able to help people move forward with healthy coping skills, to prevent reducing substance and preventing substance abuse disorders or developing kind of unhealthy coping skills as we move into the new normal. So build back better is kind of the idea behind this. So the pandemic happened in our life. How do we move forward in a healthy way? We're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be trauma sensitive. So trauma informed, I think most people are familiar with the term. It's recognizing that sometimes people have struggles in life that interfere with their ability to function or make sound decisions. So for the purpose of this presentation, we're actually going to simplify trauma. It's a very complex thing to understand. A lot of people, I think, associate trauma with maybe a event that has happened that has been huge and catastrophic. But trauma in a very simplified form can be summed up this way. So trauma is anything that overwhelms the brain's ability to cope. And when we look at it with that lens, we're going to start focusing on what behaviors we see that show us that somebody is having trouble coping. And throughout this process, as people develop coping skills, we say that they increase their resilience. But how do we help them do that when, if you think about the world that we live in today, most of us can honestly say, we've never survived a pandemic. This is a new world to us. The brain patterns that we have that usually tell us what to expect throughout the day are not there. Each day we're kind of making patterns as we go along. We're all in a very vulnerable experimental stage. What works, what doesn't work. So we're kind of all in this collectively. And that's kind of a new thing for us. So how can we use that to our advantage? So where I got this perspective on trauma and behavior as an adaptation to the complexities of the world is a really fantastic book, The Body Keeps the Score, The Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. So if you want to kind of delve in a little bit further on what trauma is and how it affects us, I highly recommend this book. So if we think of trauma as anything that overwhelms the brain's ability to cope, what are we looking at? So for this presentation, what I have done is I've taken information from Dr. Daniel Siegel, his representation of a hand model of the brain. And I've linked the YouTube video here. He can do a much better job of presenting this and explaining to this than I can. Once again, I'm really simplifying this for the presentation, but basically what we look at with his hand model of the brain, and I'm going to use my hand to kind of model this for you. If we look at this as the brain, and I've kind of marked the brain in here, you know, this would be your spinal cord, your brain stem, and this would be the inner workings of your brain. For the purpose of this presentation, we're going to look at two different brain states. So one is your inner workings, and we're going to specifically talk about the amygdala, which we're going to tuck in there. Your amygdala is kind of the center of your emotions. It is where your fears come from. It is where your emotions stem from. And we're going to kind of tuck that in here into the center. And if we close up the brain, we have our cortex. So our prefrontal cortex is here. And the two stages we're going to focus on is that inner working, that amygdala, our fear center, our worry center, and our prefrontal cortex. The reason this is important is our prefrontal cortex is where we apply our logic and our reason. So if we have a problem that we come up against that we need to solve, the best brain state to be in would be considered our prefrontal cortex relaxed and alert. This is our best problem-solving self right here. So what happens when we have things that make us nervous? And so we're going to think of anxiety as kind of a fear of an unwritten tomorrow. We don't know what's lying ahead, and sometimes that makes us fearful. So when our fear kind of overrides things, we call that our flipped state, right? So brain state here, we've got our flipped state, and then we've got our functioning state, our optimal state right here. Why this is important? So there's the brain state for you. Because when we are in a flipped brain state, that is not the optimal time for us to problem solve and move forward. So that is kind of our emotional state where our anxieties, fear take place. This is actually a very important brain state because it sends us a warning that something isn't right, but we have to bring ourselves back, right, to that prefrontal cortex state in order to solve the problem. So we can't solve the problem from this state. We use this as kind of a warning, a signal, and then we find ways to bring our lid back down, and then we can problem solve. So this is a very important brain stage, but we were not meant to live in this brain stage. This is kind of a warning signal stage. So how do you know what stage you are in? So the most simple and basic way to do that is simply do brain checks and ask yourself, am I feeling relaxed and alert? Those are the two things that are required for that relaxed brain state. Does my conduct, does my behavior suggest I am relaxed and alert? If the answer is yes, then you can start problem solving. You are in the optimal brain state for solving problems. If the answer is no, you are not feeling relaxed, you are not feeling alert, you know that this isn't your optimal brain state, then we're going to say you are flipped. So remember, not a bad thing, just that computer or body or brain, if you ask any third grader that's gone through our program, they'll tell you our brain is the boss of our body, right? Large and in charge. Our brain is sending our body signals. So this stage, we're getting signals that tells us maybe something is wrong. This is a very important brain state because this is what alerts us to danger, right? So that we can move ourselves, get out of the way. But what happens sometimes is when we're just worried about what tomorrow may bring, which a lot of people are experiencing right now in our COVID-19 current state, right? There's unknowns. They don't have that familiar brain pattern, so they're feeling very vulnerable. It's very easy to stay in this stage with worry and anxiety. So when we're worrying and we're anxious, it is very difficult for us to effectively solve problems. So we're in that, okay, here's a message, something isn't right, what can I do about it? When you recognize that you are in a flipped brain state, this is the time that you want to say, okay, I need to bring myself back to relaxed and alert so I can solve the problem. How do we do that? If we find that we are in a flipped state, right, we want to engage our prefrontal cortex. There's a couple things that we can do. So you hear a lot about breathing, our breath work. The reason this works is, well, there's a couple factors at play. When we recognize that we are in a flipped brain state, if we teach ourselves to focus on our breathing, it can actually help regulate our body. The reason this is important is because we used to believe that when we were stressed or under pressure, we used to believe that we just needed kind of a stronger mental fortitude to get us through it. We needed to keep trucking. But what we have learned about trauma and stress and how it affects the body is that it can actually have a very physical response. So we actually aren't just thinking about our mental fortitude, we actually have to send our body calming signals. So breathing is a great way to do that. So 4-7-8 breathing is something that maybe you've heard about before. You just take a breath in through your nose for 4 seconds to the count of 4. You're going to hold your breath for 7 seconds, and then you're going to exhale through your mouth to the count of 8. And you can repeat that as many times as needed. The reason that we inhale shorter than we exhale is because when we inhale oxygen, that naturally increases our blood pressure ever so slightly. But when we exhale, we're lowering it. So if we make the exhale just a little bit longer, it's actually going to help our body to reduce our blood pressure, which has a very calming effect on our body. Another way, if we are in that flipped brain state, to bring ourselves down to calm is to use a mantra, something that maybe we say just inside of our head that has a calming effect, like, you know, breathe, you're safe, you can handle this, right? That's what I am actually very fond of. I say that to myself when I'm up against something and in the moment I'm not sure how to react. I just tell myself, just breathe, you're safe, you can handle this. And I find that has a very calming effect on myself. You can say something like, my fear of tomorrow are simply melting away, and actually visualizing that worry melting. You can say to yourself, you know, this is tough, but so am I. I can do this, right? This is tough, but so am I. Now, a mantra is something that you can just simply say inside your head when you are struggling with something, or you can say it out loud. And this is actually very effective if you have young children around you, because sometimes when they hear you say those things and they see you regulating your emotion, that's going to become their inner voice. They're going to recognize, when I'm overwhelmed, I can say this and it can help me calm down. So it can also be a teachable moment. So you can say it out loud, or you can just simply say it in your head in the moment to help you calm down. Another great way to regulate stress and anxiety is to move your body, right? Dance around the kitchen, take a walk, do yoga, whatever you find helps you recenter so you are in your optimal brain state. Find ways to express gratitude. You can write a letter, walk the neighbors' garbage cans back to their house, feed your birds, keep a journal, call your mom, anything that just helps ground you in now and all the good that you have surrounding you can be very helpful, because when we are in that flipped brain state, we can have a very negative repeat of thoughts and emotions, and gratitude is a way to kind of replace them with some positives. You can offer and receive physical contact. You know, hugs are powerful reminders of connection. A story that I had that my son is willing to share with all of you is a story that happened early on in this pandemic. So I was quarantined with my son. He's 22 years old, college student. At the start of this quarantine, you know, he was sent home. So his classes then became online learning. Now, that was a huge change for him. Online learning is not something he would have chosen for himself. That really doesn't work with his best optimal learning patterns. So this was a huge adjustment, and he struggled, and he had good days and he had bad days. And one particular night he came in and he was ranting. Now, he used that word, not me. He was kind of going through everything that was frustrating him, and he said, I'm sorry for ranting about this, but I'm having trouble problem solving. And so my immediate reaction was, okay, you know, I should remind him that I had warned him this could happen if he didn't do this. And in the back of my head, I'm very glad I did this. I thought to myself, he is in a flipped brain state. This is not the state for optimal learning. So should I use this time to remind him of what he should have done? No, I tried a different approach. I saw that he was flipped. So I thought, how can I get him unflipped, right? How can I bring him back to the optimal brain state? And I said, you know, we got this. Just take a deep breath. I know you'll figure it out. And of course, he didn't want to breathe. That wasn't something that interested him in that moment. So I thought about this, you know, this idea of receiving physical contact. So I said, well, come sit here with me for a minute, watch the show, 5 minutes tops. Can I rub your shoulders? You know, because I could see he was really tense. And he was like, fine. So we sat down and we didn't even really talk. I just kind of rubbed his shoulders just a little bit. And just a couple minutes into it, he's like, you know, he goes, I think I know, I'm going to send an email right now. I'm just going to handle it. And I could see he was in the problem solving state naturally without anything that I taught him, or it wasn't a teachable moment. It was just that physical contact helped his lid come down and he began to problem solve on his own. So these are things that we can use for ourselves. These are things that we can use for loved ones when we recognize that they are not in the right state to problem solve. This is a great time to take up new hobbies or activities. One thing that I've discovered that, you know, in this pandemic world that we are living in, there's a lot of free resources out there now and learning opportunities that are being offered. You know, there's on YouTube, you can watch Broadway shows that have been brought to YouTube, so you don't have to travel to New York City to see them on Broadway. You know, you can take classes through famous museums. You can, you know, take a tour through them and look at paintings. So these are things that if we take advantage of the free things that are offered to us now, that can have a calming effect. Another really great thing to do is kind of establish a routine that works for us and our family and stick to it. So I mentioned before, our brains are pattern seeking. And as soon as kind of we went into this pandemic, that pattern that we used to pick up on that would say, you know, oh, this was a rough day, but tomorrow will be a better day. And you kind of have this idea of how tomorrow will go. We kind of lost that. We were in this, you know, pandemic world. All of a sudden, every day was a new day. And we didn't have those patterns that we rely on to help give us the confidence to face the day. We were establishing new patterns. But that also gives us the opportunity right now to establish healthy patterns. So our brains are pattern seeking. Giving our brain a pattern can have a calming effect. And we can achieve this through listening to music. There's a beat, there's a rhythm, there's a pattern that can be calming to us. This is why a lot of people kind of veer towards music when they need to be calmed, right? It can have a very calming effect. Poetry has the same kind of rhythm to it that can be very comforting. And then butterfly hugs is something that I was not familiar with, but I've actually used it several times in the last couple months, and I can understand why those patterns are comforting. So a butterfly hug, I think it was probably intended for children, but I find it calming for myself, is just very simply, you're going to take your hands, loop the middle, and you're going to place it on your chest. So it kind of looks like a butterfly. And then as you're just kind of breathing calmly, you're going to flap, I guess, the wings on the butterfly. And that tapping gives your body a very calming rhythm. So I find that when I am feeling most anxious, simply doing this, and if you take the time to do this, you will see why this works. You will notice that your body responds to that rhythm in a very calming way. Another thing that, you know, if you don't want to do that because you're feeling very anxious or very flipped right in the middle of a meeting, another one is just kind of placing your hands on your shoulder and brushing down. That can be more inconspicuous to do that a couple times, but it has a very calming effect, right? It's a pattern and a rhythm that your brain will respond to. Any chance you get to kind of step away from what you're doing and just simply play, do something you enjoy, is very beneficial to helping your brain make its way to that relaxed, alert state. And always give yourself plenty of grace and patience. So treat yourself and others kindly, right? Learn to notice things instead of passing judgment on things. I wish that all of my Facebook friends could find ways to express their views without judging others, because judging can actually put you in that flipped state. So sometimes the observations that I see, and Facebook is the worst for it, tends to flip people's lids. And then so they're sitting there, and when they're flipped, they're not making their best decisions. So, you know, you end up with this big Facebook face-off. But if they could learn to say, hey, you know, I recognize that my body's sending me signals, I'm in a flip state, how can I bring myself down to that my best self, my optimal state? So moving forward, what do we do with this information that we have? So anytime that we can learn about our reaction to things, right, that self-awareness, it helps us grow and meet the challenges that are before us. So a really good place to start is doing brain checks, right? Check in with yourself. What brain state am I in? Am I relaxed and alert? If the answer is no, you know you are flipped and you need to do something to get yourself back to that optimal state. So a lot of people say, okay, I can do that. But remember, this isn't a pattern that your brain is used to. So just saying that you'll do it doesn't mean it's going to happen. You might want to put Post-its kind of in a couple places around the house so that when you see that Post-it, you can ask yourself, what brain state am I in? You won't have to do that forever, but it gives you a way of kind of making it familiar to check in with your brain state. Am I flipped? Is this an optimal brain state? Because you know if you're flipped, you're not going to be able to problem solve until you bring yourself back to that alert, relaxed state. Dr. Becky Bailey wrote a program called Conscious Discipline, which is evidence-based. It's a fantastic program, but she always says we must first upload calm to download calm in others. So certainly as educators, parents, or just community members, people are going to feed off our emotional state. And actually, anxiety is one of the most contagious emotional states. So if we are anxious, the people around us can pick up on that and they will feel anxious too. So we have to learn to upload calm in ourselves, because then we can teach others to do it. That's how we download into others. So being familiar with your brain state and knowing how you can get yourself to that optimal state is going to help us remain calm and teach it to others. So make a list of calming activities that work for you. On our wall in our house, we actually have a list of things so that if we recognize we're in a flip state, we can just pick something off the list. I love to walk my dog. I love to garden. I love to be outside. And I know that when I am feeling like my mind is ruminating and I'm not able to find a solution, I need to pick something from that list and go do it. That's going to help get me in a better brain state for problem solving. And it almost always works. I come back and I can look at things differently in a much healthier way. So search for resources and learning opportunities. You know, sometimes when we look at the past, we can say maybe that we weren't thinking about our brain states, but when we are agitated or anxious, sometimes the coping skills that we develop are not the healthiest for us long term. Our brains are pattern seeking, so they would tend to go towards those old patterns that maybe weren't so helpful. This pandemic that we are in right now there is no blueprint for what tomorrow's going to look like. So right now is really important for us to build those positive coping skills so that we're building positive brain patterns. So in the past, where maybe we felt agitated, mad with the world, and we just thought, oh my gosh, I'm just going to go home and just drink. I need a drink right now. That is something that our body can say, hey, yeah, last time you had a drink, you did feel better, right? It can work. But that becomes a problem if we are in a brain state where we think, okay, in order for me to feel relaxed and alert, I need to drink. That's not a relaxed, alert stage. That's not optimal brain functioning. And it can actually develop a very unhealthy coping pattern. So how can we build new patterns? We can find healthy activities that help get us in the optimal brain state that are not going to be harmful to us in the long run. So if you're kind of looking at, well, I don't even know what I enjoy doing. I don't know what's going to make me feel relaxed. I'm a great lover of Pinterest, and I can tell you, if you go onto Pinterest, you can find lists like this that will give you all these healthy coping skills. And if you look at them, you can probably, as I look at it, I can see several things on there that would help me achieve alert, calm, optimal state. Exercise is a great one. Walking the dog, going outside, creating art if you're a creative person. These are things that can move you into that optimal brain state. So find a list, find what works for you, and post it somewhere so that when you need it the most, it's available. So the last thing I would like to ask you to do is if you could give me a little bit of feedback on this presentation. I'm hoping that you found something here that you found was helpful to you. And there are 3 questions I want to ask you. Will you share what you learned in this presentation? Who will you share that information with? And what is it that you are going to share? So just 3 simple questions. And I've got the information on the screen. If you could just email that to me at adecker@stny.twcbc.com. I really appreciate that feedback. It allows me to tweak my presentations and offer them in ways that is very useful to the community. And I enjoyed spending this time with you. I hope you have a great day. And this is probably going to take me a minute to stop all of this. So in the meantime, make sure you get these questions down. I'll leave it up here. 3 simple questions that you can email to me, and I appreciate all of your feedback. Thank you so much.